So nature versus nurture. What's the verdict?
It depends. Nature versus nurture. I would say, as boring as it is, I feel it's definitely both for most things. I think we do have genetic strengths, genetic weaknesses with regard to some things. How some people drop body fat, how some people gain muscle mass, etc., etc. I think those things are more nature that there can be a potential advantage, disadvantage there. But just because you have a certain nature doesn't mean that your nurture cannot influence you in either a positive or a negative way. So I think there is a quote that I've heard a while ago. It's genetics loads the gun, environment pulls the trigger. So that's the way I'll look at nature versus nurture.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think there's no argument that genetics and nature do play their role. I think if you look at, say, Michael Phelps, his wingspan of his arms are much beyond most regular people. He's obviously predisposed to being a good swimmer, and then the nurture side of things with training and his lifestyles help that. I think if you look at, say, Usain Bolt and compare him to Mo Farah, I'm sure the way they were born with regards to the makeup of their muscle fibers and things like that, they were going to be predisposed to what they've gone on to do. But I think disregarding nurture would be nurture, yeah, would be a big mistake. I know actually when I was at uni, we did a full module on the kind of nature versus nurture thought process. And there was some really interesting stuff that came out with regards to nurture with two theories or things that have been found, known as the relative age effect and the relative birthplace effect, I think they're called. So the relative age effect basically shows that if you're born between September and November, you're more likely to be an Olympian than if you're born.
So the relative age effect refers really to where in the year you're born, determining or having a large influence on your success in later life. So there's a lot of research to show that if you're born between September and November, you're much more likely to become an Olympian than if you're born later on in the year. And so people who've thought about this and researched it basically seen that when you're younger, being older, so if you think of a school year, if you're born in September, you may also have someone else in your same school year who's born in August. So although you're categorized in the same class, you've been on the earth for almost a year longer than some other people. And so when you're 50 or 60, that difference may not be as big. But when you're, say, 10, you've been alive and growing and maturing for 10% longer than some of the other people in your class. And so simply the way that the school system is and where the years get divided can give some people a massive advantage and some people not. And if when you are 6, 7, 8, whatever, you get into the A team, you then, because you're probably bigger, more mature, you just developed a bit more, you then get the better coaching in the A team. The scouts come and look at the A team, not the B team. And so it almost becomes this cycle that if you are better when you're young, you just keep progressing. And if you look at the stats and say the Olympics, it's crazy how much of a difference it does make. And then there's the relative birthplace effect, where they found where you come from can have a massive effect on success as well. So if you're from an area of a certain population, it can really define or really make a big difference in how then you progress. So they found that if you're in a really rural area, there's not many other people around, it's not the best because there's not likely to be much facilities or many people to play football with or whatever it is. On the other end of the spectrum, if you're in a really densely populated place, say you're in London, you're likely not going to be allowed to just go out and have free play as much. So, if it's a rough area or it's highly, built up, your parents, when you're younger, might not let you just go out and play in the street all evening. And then there's a middle ground. I can't remember the exact numbers for the populations, but where you have enough people of similar age to go out and play football or whatever it is, but it's also a safe enough and enough space. And I remember doing a presentation on it, and I thought, all right, I'll get some examples. And I basically looked at the latest, World Cup winners for football, rugby, the tennis. Like I went off a range of sports, and virtually all of them were a really high percentage of the top performers across sport all fell into the age and the population brackets for grown up, which I think shows that nurture obviously does play a huge role.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I was also a while back looking into the research of why a lot of African Americans are really, really fast and really explosive for most sports. And there does seem to be, related to the birth theory that you were talking about there is a certain place in Africa. It's I cannot remember the exact location. It's somewhere close to West Ghana. There is like a small group that resides there where all the best sprinters in the world have come from. So like the Usain Bolts and all that sort of stuff. Obviously, he is from Jamaica and whatnot, but there does seem to be like a certain region where a lot of these very, very fast twitch, explosive, fast, muscular, genetically just muscular people seem to come from. And when you look into why this was the case, there are obviously many confounding factors, being close to the equator, having higher vitamin D levels than normal, which is going to then help with testosterone production, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, having not being surrounded by the city and all that toxic sort of stuff as well as malaria was a really big thing back there. So what happened was I cannot remember the exact way it sort of happened, but their fibers started moving away from type 1 to type 2 because malaria does seem to impact people that have more type 1 fibers because of some oxygenation. That's how malaria does have its impact in the body. So their fiber types actually started to change in an adaptation to prevent malaria infections, which is insane. So over time they became more fast twitch, they became more explosive, all that really interesting stuff. So yeah, it was like a variety of confounding factors that are just creating this genetic pool of elite athletes, so very interesting.
I think even if you put it back to, even if you take it back to, like, for example, in the business world, where you've got certain areas in the world that are known for innovation. For example, Silicon Valley in California is well known for the birth of so many of the world's biggest companies now. And it's just that people, less so now because you can do anything from anywhere, but it's still the hub for technology and innovation. And it's still known as, you go to Silicon Valley to innovate. And if you're in Silicon Valley, you're around all those people innovating. And that culture is what drives that innovation. It's like when it's similar in certain universities as well, where it's known these universities will create X amount of types of people or these types of people because that environment is being cultivated to facilitate a certain type of culture. And I think it comes in multi-faceted areas of life that we have, in that there's no surprise that the top 1% come from certain areas because it's cultivated in them.
Yeah, attention and priority is based on different things, isn't it? I think if you go back to sport example, if you look at the countries that are dominant in certain sports, in those countries it's normally their national sport, so there's a big focus on it. Everyone wants to play that sport or whatever, and so then even if they're genetically as kind of predisposed to being good at that sport as someone in another country, if there's a lot more focus on that, then they're more likely to have that nurture to reach the top of that potential. And then again with schools, if you go to a good school or a school that's known to be academic, it may be that the teachers are better, but it may just be that by going there you're surrounded by more academically focused kids, and then it just it feeds that focus.
Then the big question is always like, well, you said that it depends on both, right? But then I always think like there must be like the next Steve Jobs somewhere in an environment that just doesn't allow he or she to become that person, because the environment isn't conducive to them fulfilling that potential. And I think that's where the both is needed, because without the nurturing environment to cultivate that potential and fulfill it, nothing can really happen.
Yeah, that's very true for IQ. For people who are born super, super intelligent. There are obviously a lot of the most successful people ever in the history of the world have also had high IQs as like a sort of default, but there are also a lot of people that have had very, very high IQs who ended up getting nowhere because either being in a poor environment or self-sabotage with other things, like drinking or any other self-destructive behaviors that didn't allow them to reach their full potential. So IQ does seem to be a really, really big one. And there was this experiment, I think it was some either Russian, Ukrainian psychologists back in like the 70s, where the ethics weren't as sort of solidified as they are now. And he literally put an ad out in the paper because he wanted to see if he could actually create geniuses like that are not born. So he literally just wanted to see if he could create an environment to make genius or prodigies. That's what it was. So he ended up putting an ad out for a wife, saying that this is going to be this is what it is. This is what I want. I want to find a wife that I can have either a couple kids with because of this experiment. I want to see if I can completely just alter if we can bring up someone from an early age to become a genius. I want to see if it can be done. And apparently he was the first person to raise 3 female chess champions, and they were all geniuses, which was pretty crazy. So
what was the ad qualifications?
Oh, I cannot remember. But for those who are interested, I'm trying to think of it could have been like the prodigy experiment for people that want to look it up, or it was either some Ukrainian psychiatrist who just wanted to see if he could bring up prodigies. So I know the word prodigy was there in the title, but it was a very, very interesting experiment. And he actually he just literally their whole life growing up was just chess. And same with Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods, his entire when he was growing up was all golf, all 100% golf. But then again, there's another book by, I think it was Epstein. It's called Range. I don't know if you guys have read that, where he actually goes into how people excel at sports and how they become the best in the world. And besides people like Tiger Woods, there are very, very few who actually specialized early on. And many successful people like Roger Federer, I cannot name any others at the moment, but what they found was that when they were growing up, they actually experienced a lot of different sports and they were exposed to a variety of stimulus. And then they actually ended up finding their key sport to really focus on. So, and apparently that seems to be one of the best ways to actually get very, very good at one particular thing by actually doing a variety of things, which sounds a little bit counterintuitive.
Yeah, well, especially up to the age of 10, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of research come out in the last 10 years about that, and there's a model called the long-term athlete development model, which basically is about that, and it's just like a pyramid approach in which you have this broad range where you're doing like swimming, gymnastics, running, everything at the start, and then as you get older, it just narrows, and then maybe at say 18, you are then just playing football or rugby or tennis or whatever, but you've then just slowly brought that to a peak. And I think it's natural, I think, to think, if I want my kid to be a footballer or he really likes football, playing that all the time from 4 is going to be the most beneficial. But you're going into that really specialized thing without having that foundation of different movement patterns and motor skills and things like that, which doing the other sports up to that point kind of just builds you. There's a lot of research behind that.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So that's a lot of nurture, that's a lot of nurture there.
Yeah, and I think what you said about the prodigy experiment is really is interesting, but it's such you can't really pull it apart to see if it's nurture or nature, because he's obviously looked for this specific woman to have kids with to aid the
and
nature side of things.
He's also smart. Yeah, he's also intelligent.
To aid the
and
nature
we know IQ does have a huge genetic component there too. So.
But then obviously when they were born, he's really put a structured kind of approach in place. So it was very much like a nurtured approach as well. So, I mean, ultimately, if you want to be the best at anything, you're going to need both. But
But what's the one you have the most control over? I would say it's going to be your environment, right?
Mm-hmm. No,
So
exactly.
no matter what genetic hand you're dealt, you should always try to optimize the nurture side of things to the best of your ability, in my opinion.
Yeah.
This comes back to fix the growth mindset, right? If you're a fixed mindset, you'll just accept your genetics and your environment as they are, and not and
Yep.
play the victim mentality of, oh, this is just the hand I've been dealt with, or this is just the place I live in, or this is just the way I
Yep.
think, or this is just the way I am. But a growth mindset would say, okay, well, this is where I'm at now. This is what I could become, and let
Yep.
me make these changes.
Yeah.
Even if it's, whether it's the way you think or whether the way you are. If there's room for positive improvements, they will take that.
Yep.
And there's
I think.
Sorry, you go, Ivan.
You go, Ed. No, you go, Ed. You go.
I was just going to say there's a lot of things, especially in the working world, that but it could be applied to sport or anything really, I guess, that actually require no natural talent and just I guess work ethic and effort, which just comes through nurture. Things like turning up on time, like hitting deadlines, being polite, which all sounds so very basic. But I know, just coming from like the fitness industry, for example, if you look at personal trainers across the board, if you find a trainer who is on time, is professional in their appearance, actually walks the walk, cares about their clients, pays attention to their clients during the sessions, you're already looking at a trainer probably in the top 10% of all trainers. And none of that is actually linked in with any innate talent or anything that's come from nature. It's just come from something that they can control. And so, although even if you're not born with whatever natural talent is required to be the number one out of physical quality, I think the nurture and the effort side of things can take you a very long way.
Yeah. Just on that fixed growth mindset approach. The book list you recommended to us, AB, the 5-book. What was it? Who was the guy who sent that again? The high performance coach.
Michael Phelps.
Yeah. So I've always heard about Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, and I've actually started listening to that. And for anyone who thinks they've got it bad, I would highly recommend listening to the account of Viktor Frankl, because he literally wrote this book about his experience being in the concentration camp as a prisoner of war, as a prisoner of the Nazis. And the way the book is described, and the way the narrator does a really good job of just having this completely neutral voice with everything that happens. And it's haunting. It's haunting to watch. It's haunting to listen to, but it gives you so much more perspective of what the human is, what we are capable of when push comes to shove. There was this one example that he was talking about that was so vivid, and I just could not stop picturing it. Was we all complain about not being able to sleep if it's like a little bit too hot or a little bit too cold or a little bit of noise happening outside or whatever. And then he's talking about having nine men sleep in a radius of like 5 meters on top of each other, not showered, not allowed to bring their shoes into people sneaking in their shoes so they could actually use them as pillows to sleep. And he goes, when you're that exhausted, trust me, you find a way to sleep. You don't complain about anything. You're just happy that you got like a couple hours shut eye. And it was so many examples like that throughout the entire book. And they just make you just go, oh my God. Like, this is growth mindset down to the T. And the whole premise of the book is like, no matter what the situation, the last freedom we all have, no matter the circumstances, choosing how to respond. We choose how that situation makes us feel. And no Nazi officer, no person, no event can take that away from you. Obviously a lot easier said than done, but just a really, really great principle to live by, in my opinion.
Well, that book's one of the best books I've read. Completely changed my perspective on everything when I read it. I remember reading it. I read it on the beach, so it's probably it wasn't I took it on holiday thinking this is a nice holiday read to do, but it probably was not the experience to have on the beach. But I couldn't stop reading it because
it's haunting.
Yeah, and the book is split. I don't know how far you're in, but the book's split into 2 parts. You've got the Holocaust account, and then you've got all his theories on logotherapy. and
Oh,
his
and I'm still
theories
on
on
Holocaust.
on
Yeah.
psychology, because he's a psychologist, and
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and he argues that the best chance of survival, those who had the best chance of survival, had a quest for meaning. They had a
Yes.
genuine, and
Yes.
it comes from like three possible sources. It's creating a
Yeah.
work or a deed, so that's finding
Yeah.
work in purpose in our career. It's
Yeah.
experiencing someone or something, so like love, or I think for him it was very much
It
around his
was.
wife, but
Yeah, it was.
also
Yeah.
around getting the message out, because I think he wrote that book. He wrote his theories on that book like multiple times, and it kept getting taken away from him, or it kept getting thrown away. But he had this purpose to get the message out there. So there was that,
It's
and then you had the
amazing.
wife as well. And then, like you said,
Yeah.
it's the attitude to when you have unavoidable suffering, or when you have genuine suffering, like
Yeah.
not orchestrated in our own way, but genuine suffering. How you respond to that is how you
Yeah.
was the biggest chance of survival. Those who took the fixed I'm stuck in a Holocaust, those were, you know, they quickly died because they had no purpose or meaning beyond that. Whereas those who chose to kind of control that internal narrative were able to navigate externally the best way possible, even if like we're talking environment that we couldn't even possibly fathom, right? And this morning, actually, I was just writing before, and you know the thing you said yesterday on the webinar, around, we don't have to train, we don't have to eat well. It's that we get to train, we get to eat well, and it's such a privilege that we don't realize how much of a luxury it is to actually prioritize self-care. And like when we talk about orchestrated suffering, or we talk about the grind and all these sorts of things, like, it's a terminology around that, but these are intentionally making things difficult so you can become a better person out of it. But actual suffering is when it's unavoidable and it's being placed onto you without your choice. And that's what this book really talks about. I think it's a fantastic read that everyone should read it. It really puts things in perspective, but also changes the way you think around meaning and purpose in your life.
Dr. Scott Stevenson actually has a really good quote in relation to kind of the whole suffering thing, and his wasn't as extreme as the Nazis and stuff like that. He was just talking about the pain of a hard set in a training session. But he basically said that pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Referring to, if you go hard in a set, it's going to hurt. But ultimately, if you're in that middle of the set, if you're going into the set thinking of the benefit it's going to give you, physically and mentally, then you're not going to be suffering. If you go into it hating it, feeling sorry for yourself, oh, my coach is making me do this leg press or whatever it is, then that pain is then suffering. But that is 100% perception. And I haven't read the book, but it sounds like, the author
You'll love it,
you were talking
You'll
about
there,
his perception, even in one of the worst situations imaginable, is what differentiated him from the people who didn't survive it.
Honestly, it's so raw as well. It's extremely raw. Like, it was not a beach. I was in Gran Canaria reading that.
AV, you should listen to it, because it's an audiobook and the narrator is just so like neutral with everything that he reads. Like, it's no emotion in any of it. It's like, I think that's also what adds it, right? It's just that, just like so casually just talking about, just describing situations like that are just like, that's unfathomable. And it really captivates you, because you start to like, when all of us get like a little bit hungry, we're like, oh, I can't, just really want to eat now. But he was talking about how that feeling, he would have that feeling for like the entire day. And then like when they used to get their bread break at like 9:30 or 10 o'clock, that was it. They were like starving and they were looking at the clock for their like little lunch break for like one little tiny piece of bread. That was all they got, like a piece of ration. But he goes, you learn to just really value that. You learn to just value that little bit of bread that you get, sporadically. And he goes, just the way, the things that you can get used to, you cannot believe, like the strength of the human spirit when, as you said, when the will is strong. And I think, he does quote Nietzsche. It's like, any, what's his quote? A man who has a why can endure anyhow. I think that was it. Something along the lines of that. And it's just insane. And that's the definition of a growth mindset. Like, we are nothing compared to that.
Yeah, things we often complain about, and it's a sobering reality check if we catch ourselves doing it. Like you're like, what are we
Yeah.
complaining about? What we're complaining that
Yeah.
there's too much food, or we're complaining that we've got nothing to do and we're in lockdown.
Yeah.
All we've
I
been
think
told
Yeah.
to do is sit at home.
Yeah.
something that's helped me a lot
Access
with
to
that,
internet.
and I'm sure you guys would be the same as well, would be taking yourself to the extreme. Because I think, say before you've ever got lean or pushed yourself in that way, I definitely probably had a slight fear of hunger. Like, oh, I'm getting hungry, and it was like a big worry. Whereas I think once you have pushed yourself hard and you have had periods of self-imposed hunger, like when you are at the end of a fat loss phase, there's going to be periods of your day when you are hungry. Once you've been through that and you know that you can survive it, if you're then later on in your journey or in more of a lifestyle phase, you forget your lunch or a meeting overruns, your lunch gets pushed back an hour or whatever it is, and you start to get hungry, you don't go into the same kind of panic or worry, because you've been there before, you've been in a worse situation, you can then draw on that, and it's not a big issue. But I think, and I'm not in any way comparing the extreme you go to in a self-imposed diet compared to, say, like the Holocaust stuff, but by going and experiencing something harder, when you then come back to a more normal life, if there is something that's slightly challenging, it's a breeze, because you've been to that more extreme level.
Yeah.
Managing hunger when you're extremely lean is like, it's definitely an experience. Like if you miss your meal, or if you miss a meal or you're a delayed meal, you're in a very difficult position.
That's
Like,
legit. That is legit. Yeah,
yeah.
for
I
sure.
can't remember one time I was driving back from something, and I had to go down the motorway. It was a 2-hour drive, but it was it was fine. I had my meal before the motorway, and I knew when I'd get home, all being well, 3 hours later I'll have my next meal. But this as you can probably imagine, traffic hit, and it took about 3.5 to 4 hours to get home. And I remember thinking, I got to like 3 hours, and I was just, first I needed to pee, but outside of, when you need to pee more and more when you're probably on more caffeine and all these stimulants and all these sorts of things. So I needed to pee, but more than that, I was just, you get so hungry that you start feeling sick.
Yeah.
So it was getting to that point, and and then you're doing all the tricks you can in your head to try and maintain just sanity. I think obviously it's worse because you're so shredded, but these people in the concentration camps, they were shredded as well, right? They had no body fat left.
Technically, yeah.
They had no body fat left.
No.
So they were on low body fat and like what, a couple hundred calories?
Yeah.
And they didn't have all those stimulants to help keep them going either, did they?
Well, they just had a shitty environment. Yeah.
Did you remember the bit where he was describing what he saw in the mirror when he saw himself?
No.
It was just, he goes, seeing my reflection of what I've like withered down to was haunting. Just seeing myself just catabolize myself every day, getting smaller and smaller, becoming more and more emaciated. I was just like, holy shit, is he describing a diet, or what's he like, just withering? Is just like seeing all his friends like wither away to like nothing, and that you have no control over it. Like, it's just, you wither away and you're expected to work, and the guards would base their, if you had any inkling. He was describing one guy being penalized for going to the sick bay at the wrong time. Like, because he obviously had like a fever and he couldn't work, but he tried to go to the sick bay while he should have been working. And obviously everything there would have been completely unjust, but just being punished for going to the sick bay at the wrong time,
Yeah, it was all day manual labor. It was 12 hours a day manual labor.
Yeah.
So to put that into context, you're probably talking what, 25 to 30,000 steps with 12 hours of cardio, 12 hours cardio, and maybe 100 calories. So if anyone's complaining, but the deeper message is a very, very strong one here, and I think anyone listening should definitely read this book. It's called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
Yeah, and I think perception is always going to be so important, but especially during such like a weird time we're in, especially in the UK, we're in lockdown, and perception, I know, as you guys touched on with the lockdown, is huge, because it can be very easy to feel sorry for yourself not being able to meet your friends for a coffee or do anything like that. Whereas in reality, as I'm saying, we've got the internet. Hopefully you've got your health. Hopefully your loved ones have got their health. which is a lot more than a lot of other people have got. I realize I just put internet and your own and your family's health in the same basket there, but
it is these days. Like it's insane. Oh, yeah. And it's another time for if you are bored at home, then it's a fantastic time to actually like learn a new skill, learn something new. Like it's a great. You have all the resources like the Great Courses Plus for anyone that wants to learn about obscure topics. Fantastic subscription. You can spend hours on that thing. You can spend hours watching our videos and listening to our podcasts. You can always be learning. You can always be doing something. When you're at home, bored, not doing anything, you can always find something that's going to help you become better in the future. Use this time now to, do that startup that you've always wanted to do, or whatever it is. I think it's a great opportunity if you frame it that way, versus just being like, oh, I'm stuck indoors again. It's like, yeah, but it's like super cold over there. Why would you want to go outside? Stay indoors.
Yeah, the other interesting thing too that I'm trying to get head around is the actual concept of boredom. That's a really interesting one. It's like actually just trying to be bored. That's really because what we end up doing is it's so easy to fill boredom now, but actually trying to be bored is really difficult. But it's probably something we could all do more of, because you can really tune into yourself then.
I'm guilty.
Is that something you've been actively trying to do recently?
I'm more just thinking about it.
I can't see you being very good at that.
No, because I was just thinking about it. I was thinking like, in the evenings when I'm not working, I'm like, oh, I'm probably thinking about work, but I'm also like, well, what if I was just bored?
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not good at it. No, not at all.
No, but I think to make the most of this time and do the stuff that you were just kind of mentioning there, Ivan, that growth mindset is key, because there needs to be that internal drive to improve or to grow, I guess. And I think when you look at it more directly to the journey of transformation, I think it can be natural, or maybe from the environment we've all been nurtured in up to this point, to think that once you hit your checkpoint, you are at that end of the road. But really, that's where a lot of the growth actually comes, and that's where having a growth mindset is so important, to keep that journey going and not just seeing the checkpoint as a destination, but as what it is, a checkpoint on the journey, to ensure that growth keeps coming beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, a fixed mindset is someone who will focus on just the quick results and a short-term plan and the checkpoint. They'll be obsessed with the fleeting moment of a checkpoint. Well, they won't even see it as fleeting. They'll see it as it, and they'll continue to live their lives knowing that they hit a checkpoint once in their life. But a growth-oriented individual will know that it's just a fleeting moment, and that the reality is the real power comes in learning how to stay in shape and activating all you can from that.
The problem with also having that fixed mindset once you've hit that checkpoint is, if you're fixed in how it was done as well, you only can see achieving that checkpoint with one method. So potentially you might think, oh, I did it with low carbs, or I did it eating just potatoes, or I did it only eating at these meal times.
The RNG diet.
Yeah, I did it with an upper lower split. I did it with week 8's the week I dropped my steps, week 10 is the cardio week, whatever it is. You can end up with this fixed mindset. And I know there's the quote of whatever, if you've only got a hammer in your toolbox, everything looks like a nail. So that if ever you try and achieve that again, or if you were to help someone else, you're only going to see it from that one perspective, and you're going to view everything as a nail and then just hit it with a hammer. Whereas if you have that growth mindset, you have to use your journey is going to go a certain way, but then as you continue to learn and evolve, you'll see that there are other ways of achieving it. And I know the way I do things now is different to a year ago, not necessarily drastically, but there's different things I've kind of picked up or adapted, and then that only gets bigger and bigger the further I look back down my training career and life. And so without that growth mindset, I'd literally just be still stuck in the way of how I tried to get lean for my holiday when I was 19, still be trying to do that 10 years later, which I can tell you didn't get as good results or wasn't as efficient as how I could do it now. But without that, I'd still be doing the same stuff now. So I think without that growth mindset, you can't add the other tools to your toolbox, and you're stuck with the hammer for life.
The other thing with the growth and fix is those with the fixed will struggle with adaptability around when life gets in the way, and will struggle around. They'll always be waiting for a clearing. Like they'll always be waiting for the perfect time to do this, the perfect time to do that. Anytime something does come up, they'll knee jerk and they'll think that they can't do anything. They think it's all or nothing, right? Whereas a growth oriented person will be, okay, well, this has come up in my life. This has happened. Let's find a way to work around it, or let's find a way to incorporate into my life, because it's a given. It's happened. I can't do anything about it. So let's move around it and work and navigate through.
Yeah, you accept it, you face it head on, and in the research, I think it's called active versus passive coping. So, and people who, I would say it's pretty much the fixed growth mindset. Just another way of saying it is people who partake in active coping, which is actually facing the issue head on, and seeing how they can resolve it, how can they make it better, and what they can control. The passive coping is just doing things to distract yourself away from the problem. So overeating, drinking, smoking, or whatever is diverting you away from what you actually need to do. Procrastination, it's a huge one. That sort of stuff, that is all passive coping, burying your head in the sand, so to speak, and hoping it goes away. And yeah, research shows that if you fall into that latter category, you're not going to get very, very far in life. And yeah, any minor blip in your routine or in your day is going to set you back what feels like weeks, months, years, and I'm sure no one wants to be in that situation. So
the thing with passive coping is also you end up just feeding the muck more and more, and you end up using more and more crutches, and you just fuel that vicious cycle of behavior that is very difficult to get out of once you're there.
And it feeds into that identity. I think we touched on the other week, with if you are passive with it, then you can maybe accept, or like, I would be able to get results, but I'm someone who has 10 pints every weekend, or I would be able to get in great shape, but I'm the guy with the bad back, or whatever it is, rather than addressing, what you're trying to cover up by drinking 10 pints every weekend, or actually putting the work in to get to the root of the issue that's causing you back pain, or whatever it is. And it's you have that choice, I guess, of that active approach of going to the source, or you can keep going with the passive approach where, but as you said, that just feeds the identity, which just then spirals over time.
Procrastination is one of the best ways to understand if you're delaying facing something. Like for something as simple as, like, for example, when I know I'm moving something in the calendar too often, I know I'm either not facing it, or there's an underlying reason why I'm not wanting to do that certain task. And that's a huge thing. It's usually identify, okay, well, why have I delayed that 3 times? It's either something I don't like doing, but more importantly, it's probably represents something I don't really believe in, or that needs to change drastically, or there's something that needs to be addressed, a conversation that needs to be had, or whatever it may be. That's usually a really good telltale sign of something you need to deal with, as opposed to just kind of sweeping under the carpet.
Yeah.
And these things that we all do push back or avoid, they're not easy things. So it's there's a reason why there is the easier route is to avoid them, and so it can take guts or whatever to address it. But if you can actually get to that route, then you can actually solve it and move forward properly, rather than just keep skirting around it.
That's why it's introspection plus action.
Exactly.
Don't be like another self-help guru, Ed. The other thing that's worth probably touching on is the concept of critical thinking, and just being a critical thinker. I think it applies a lot from what you just said, and being able to analyze your own situation, but being able to critically think on situations in order to make progression. One example that's really pertinent is, for example, the book. In the book and how it relates to the journey. So I don't know if Ivan, you want to tackle this rant, because I know you always talk about it every day.
Absolutely love to. Absolutely love to. Love the book. Fantastic book. But again, remember the information that is provided there again should be a framework for everyone to follow. Okay, it's not the journey that is mapped out in that book is not your exact journey. So sorry, you're not in a dip. You're fine. You just need to find out. You just need to get your non-negotiables back in place. You need to get. I personally think people who feel that they are in a dip, they just need to get their three S's back in place. They need to go back to their why, find out why they're doing all of this, and then that dip will magically just disappear. The thing is, if you're expecting a dip to come at that week, I don't know what is in the book, week 9, 10, something like that. Doesn't matter. Like the thing is, the point I'm trying to make is, don't think that just because you're reading a journey in the book and how it's laid out, that does not mean that's your exact journey and that's how it's going to pan out. You know, if you never heard of the dip, then that dip potentially could have never happened. Remember, the dip is included in the book because it's something that may happen, but that doesn't mean it's going to happen to you. So if we are looking at this from a critical thinking point of view, there's a difference between reading information and just regurgitating it versus reading the information, understanding the concepts behind what the message is trying to convey, and then applying that message in your own context. So in my opinion, critical thinking is being able to extract data, information from the world, and think about it rationally and how you can actually apply that to better your life. You know, so just because one person says that you respect, oh yeah, carbohydrates, I can't eat carbs. As soon as I cut carbs out, I'll lose body weight. Oh, cool. That means carbs make you fat, right? So that's again a very, very, very common view that we see a lot of the time. And then we get people eating carbohydrates and they start losing weight. It's like, oh my God, that's magic. No, it's just calories in, calories out. But again, if you don't have that critical mindset if someone said that to you and you don't have that critical thinking ability to go, oh, why did that happen? Why did that person start losing weight when they did cut carbohydrates? I'm going to actually start looking into that. And then you actually find out, okay, what is the mechanism behind why they lost weight? Well, they cut out carbohydrates, they eliminated an entire food group. Therefore, their total energy intake was dropped and they started losing weight because of that. Not because they eliminated carbs, it's because they reduced the energy intake. Boom, that's the answer. But if you just go, oh, that person did that, I'm just going to do that. That is not critical thinking. And the same thing could be for the book. Oh, I read the book. Look, I've remembered the book. I've re-listened to the book 4 or 5 times already. Oh, cool. Why are you still binge eating? Maybe I need to listen to it 1 or 2 more times. No, you don't. You have all the information available. You need to start applying the action steps. You know, you need to start critically thinking about what is the part of the book that is really resonating with you, and how can you use that for your particular circumstance. You know.
I'm feeling very offended that you're telling people not to re-listen to the book.
If you've listened to his book 6 times,
you need to listen to it
again. Yeah.
Let my soothing voice put you to sleep. That's what's probably happening. They're probably falling asleep.
Yeah, but yeah, it's not critically thinking, right? And that's the thing. Like even the stuff that we talk about and whatnot, these are our ideas and whatnot that we've come to based on many things and whatnot. But again, like, don't ever be afraid to challenge us and ask us how we come up with decisions. You know, anytime you ask a question to someone about why something has worked for them, they should be able to explain it to you in a really rational way for you to actually understand it, for them to really know what the hell they're talking about. So yeah. Another good tip is, if you're very biased towards one way of thinking, whatever that is for you, whether it's vaccinations, whether it's keto, it's funny how I put them in the same group. But anything that you are very, very pro for or very, very against, join the opposite group. Like, go into their Facebook groups, go and see what they are actually talking about, and just see how they come up with their own conclusions. And then you make up your own mind. You know, go into carnivore communities, go into vegan communities. I actually did that back when I tried carnivore. And again, like, it was just good to get like different perspectives and good to hear what each party had to say. What do you think the answer was? Eat both, you know. You can have vegetables and you can have meat, you know. But it's going to the extremes, finding what the other opposing view is talking about, and then coming up with your own solution, you know, to the best of your own ability.
That's where I think having a base of education is so important, though. Because without some level of education, you can't think critically. And I think just going back to that carb example you said, I was someone who feared carbs for a while, But it's because I didn't have a base education. Someone had just said, "Oh, carbs after 6, whatever it was, make you fat." So I just took that as face value, and then tried to implement it with pretty poor results. Once I had that base understanding and education of energy balance with calories in, calories out, then I could critically look at that statement of carbs make you fat and realize that wasn't true. Too many calories coming in, which if that's from carbohydrate maybe will then make me fat. But as long as the calories are in control, carbs aren't going to directly make me fat. And so that's where not just following a plan or doing things mindlessly can help you so much, actually, as well as following the steps, but thinking about why, asking your coach or doing research to find the whys behind the whats is what's going to allow you to actually understand why you're doing things, and then set you up for life. Because otherwise you've got a template that you have to follow because you don't know how to deviate from it. If you understand the whys behind it, you've got principles which you can then apply, because ultimately principles will take you through any area of life, whether you're in the gym, you're at home in lockdown, you've got an injury. As long as you know the principles, you can then apply that to your situation. If you only have a program that works when you're fully fit and in the gym, if you're injured and at home, you're going to be screwed.
And here's the thing, if you're working with a coach, no matter who it is, always make sure you're thinking critically, because you need to have a BS detector for what they may be telling you. And that's including us as well.
Yeah.
Like always think like what you're hearing, think about what you're being told. And that's why every person who is improving their health and fitness has a responsibility to educate themselves, has to take ownership of their own journey, and has to take responsibility for their own actions. Because as much as I like to think we're not, there are a lot of cowboys out there, and hopefully, there are a lot of cowboys out there who regurgitate their own, potentially just their own journey. Like they might have changed their own bodies, and they now think, okay, well, I'm going to go help other people, and they'll use that same information to do it with a bunch of other people, and it doesn't work like that. You have to have a breadth of education. So for anyone who's working with a coach, just make sure you're thinking critically about working with them, and making sure that you're actually taking responsibility for it, because otherwise you can end up in a really dangerous rabbit hole yourself, whereby, like Ed was giving the example about earlier, where you only think of one way to do it. And when you start thinking there's only one way to do it, you start creating reasons for not doing it in the future, and you start procrastinating, and you start continuously waiting for a clearing. And that clearing never happens in your life. As much as we'd like to have 3, 6, 12, 18 months clear to just work on ourselves, it's never going to happen. So instead of searching for that, find ways to take responsibility, educate yourself, and build it into your life from the get-go.
Yeah, and I had a previous role where I was kind of educating and qualifying potential new trainers. And something that I would always say to them as where they were getting near the end of the course was, whatever you do, whether it's when you're writing a program or anything that you do with a client, you need to be able to ask or answer why. And that's, a lot of our sessions would literally just be looking at a program they wrote or some advice they were giving a client or whatever it was. And all I was saying was, why? And unless your coach, and this, like I said, includes us as well, has a why for everything, and the most simplest form, I think, is with a training program. You can look at the exercise order, the sets, reps, tempo, rest period, all of these things. Unless they can say why behind every single part of that, well, if they can't, I would see that as a big red light for me personally.
The other one there, is to, and I don't know if you told these trainers that, is whatever works for you doesn't work for everyone else. Because I went through a period about probably 6-7 years ago where I just got shredded for the first time. Like I'd been lean before, but I never got shredded. I got bodybuilding shredded. And I thought, all right, now I know how to go shredded. So all those tactics I used to get shredded, I started using these tactics in their clients. And it wasn't working the same way. Because then I realized that, yeah, it worked for me because it's from my lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean it's going to work for everyone else. And that's the danger that we have at the moment, because there's no barrier to entry. People will get in shape themselves and then use the same thing that they did with themselves, or probably they got from someone else actually, to then regurgitate off to others. And that's a really dangerous place that we're in the industry at the moment. So it's up to people that are interacting with companies, no matter who they are, that they take responsibility for their own actions, and they take ownership of it, and they stay aware and develop that BS meter. The other kind of telltale sign is, which I think is really, really good one. I was thinking about the other day. I was like, when you're talking about the why, is a trainer should be able to stand in front of an audience and deliver a seminar on a topic, on anything to do with body transformation overall, and they should be able to get questioned and grilled and have the answer. Doesn't mean that they need to have the best answer on every single topic. They should be able to answer to some degree, and it's their responsibility for trainers, especially new trainers in this industry, to educate themselves seriously. Like I can't remember. Sorry, I can't believe now that people can be trainers without having that breadth of education. For the first like 6-7 years of my career, I was just like spending hours and hours a day just reading, researching, thinking, trying to build my education base. But I think it's to be forgotten, and I think it's time to bring that back to reality and to make people aware that it is a problem in the industry that's happening, and there's a real shift because of the barrier to entry. So it's important as clients, no matter how you're interacting with the industry, whether it's your favorite influencer who's got a $5.99 ebook, or whether it's whatever it could be, it's important that you think critically about what information you're consuming and how it applies to yourself, and you continue to make sure that it applies in the context of challenge that you might be going through in life.
And I think this is where like principles versus plans is so important, because if, like you said, someone's just come in and is now just as a proponent of only the way that got them in shape the one time they got in shape, then they are only just going off a singular plan. Whereas without that ongoing education, you said, like, we were all obsessive for, well, maybe you could argue still are, but for that initial period of your career to build up a certain knowledge, that gives you the base of the principles that then you can apply to all of these different people in different situations. Whereas, you were young, single guy, active job, got shredded. The exact plan that you followed, no wonder probably wasn't working for some people who were, I don't know, busy mums of people with a part-time job and whatever else going on. Like the exact routine that you were doing, it wasn't going to fit with their lifestyle. But as long as you would use the same principles and adapt it to them. Whereas I guess before, maybe it was just shoving a square peg into a round hole.
Yeah.
That's the thing, like people that have done 30,000 steps on their grind think that everyone needs to be doing 30,000 steps to get in shape, things like that. And it's just like, no, you don't understand the principles. You were just like, oh, I did what I'm told. You don't understand, okay, why did that work? Oh, because steps. What? Well, what if someone literally cannot walk 10,000 steps a day? What do you do there?
Yeah. This is why let's forget about the trainers and coaches, but I think any client of this industry needs to not do this thing mindlessly. They need to not take care of themselves mindlessly. You have to be autopilot about the right things, and you can only be autopilot about things once you understand it, you've built the foundation around it, and it becomes part of your day-to-day and way of life. But until it becomes a way of life, you need to educate yourself and remain mindful of what you're doing. Else you will never develop that education base to serve you in 20, 30, 40 years time, because you can't always have someone tell you what to do for 20, 30, 40 years. You need to have to be able to run your own 2 feet. And it's important that, exactly, you've got to be able to catch your own fish.
Yeah.
And there's no education more important than the education of how to take care of yourself. And it's up to everyone listening here to be active in that education.
It's like if you learned to drive and you just didn't look at the road at all, and your driving instructor was just telling you, change gear now, turn left, do this. You'd be able to not crash, hopefully, during your lessons. But then as soon as you went out to drive on your own, you wouldn't have a clue how to negotiate the road or when you need to slow down or change gear, because all you know is, all right, when my coach tells me to go into third gear, I go into third gear. But you don't know when the coaches, your driving instructor isn't there. You're stuck in second gear and the revs are going through the roof and you don't know what to do.
Yeah. So it's planting the seeds for the future. We're gonna make this shift in the industry, and we're gonna bring it in full force. I think that's a wrap for today. Take home message: read Man's Search for Meaning, and put your life in perspective.
And don't read AV's book for the 7th time.